The first item of business this afternoon is consideration of a business motion number 5377 in the name of Joe Fitzpatrick on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau, setting out a timetable for the Stage 3 consideration of the Freedom of Information Amendment Scotland Bill. I would ask any member who wishes to speak against the motion to press the Request to Speak button now. I now call on Joe Fitzpatrick to move motion number 5377. Minister.
Formally moved.
Thank you. As no member has asked to speak against the motion, I will now put the question to the Chamber, and the question is that motion number 5377, in the name of Joe Fitzpatrick, be agreed to. Are we all agreed? The motion is therefore agreed. And we will now move to themed portfolio questions, and we'll move to question 1, which is question 1 from Alison McInnes.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what assessment it has made of the impact that proposed budget reductions will have on colleges in North East Scotland.
The Cabinet Secretary, Michael Russell.
Presiding Officer, the Government's key consideration has been to fund colleges in a way which allows the sector to continue to maintain student numbers. We are doing so. I welcome the commitment of Aberdeen and Banff-and-Buchan colleges to merge, which will provide even better opportunities to plan the delivery of learning on a regional basis and to identify where there is unnecessary duplication or waste.
Alison McInnes.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. The latest published figures show that in 2010-11, Banff-and-Buchan College and Angus College received £823,907 and £333,564 respectively as discrete funding in recognition of their rurality. In response to a SPICE inquiry on my behalf, the Scottish Funding Council has revealed that it is currently reviewing the funding methodology applied to rural colleges. Will the Cabinet Secretary explain why this is the case, what methodology is now being considered and when the revised model will be announced? And will he guarantee that colleges serving rural areas will continue to receive adequate additional funding in respect of rurality and remoteness after regionalisation?
Cabinet Secretary.
I expect, Presiding Officer, the effect of regionalisation will be to enhance the funding of Scotland's colleges according to need. And indeed, I'd be very surprised if any member in this chamber was arguing for a funding formula that did not reflect the actual needs of the colleges. My letter of instruction to the Funding Council over a long period of time since I've been Minister has always stressed that there is an importance to recognise where need exists, and I personally have always argued strongly with the Funding Council and others for recognition of rurality. So if these are the key issues that are worrying Alison McInnes, then I'm very happy to set her mind at rest. I hope she's not proposing to spend money that isn't required or to reward inefficiency, and I am very pleased that the boards of Aberdeen College and Banff-and-Buchan College have recognised the strength of merger, the strength of what will arise from merger, and the need for regionalisation.
Thank you very much. Nanette Milne.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To follow on from that, the Cabinet Secretary will, of course, be aware that in the first round of funding discussions a few years back, Angus College and Banff-and-Buchan College faced some of the largest cuts in Scotland. Can he give an assurance that colleges serving rural areas will not be hit once again and are treated this time on a level playing field?
Cabinet Secretary.
Colleges serving rural areas have always been treated on a level playing field and have been treated supportively. And indeed, I'm very pleased, for example, with the enthusiasm that Angus College is showing for its merger with Dundee. I say as gently as I can to the member that the Tories' newfound enthusiasm for backing college funding is very much at odds both with their record south of the border and also their approach to education, which has been Luddite in the extreme, in my view.
Thank you very much. Question 2, Graham Day.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what progress has been made on the plans for college regionalisation.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I think we're all very pleased with the progress which is being made. A new regional structure for the college sector has now been established. Most colleges have opted to merge. We anticipate better opportunities to plan the delivery of learning to the ultimate benefit of the learner, as well as for significant efficiencies. In the minority of regions where there will continue to be more than one college, we expect the creation of college federations to deliver similar benefits.
Graham Day.
Thank you. According to Angus College, they and Dundee are making excellent progress towards their agreed vesting date of November 1st, 2013. To ensure a successful merger, however, the new college will require financial support. The Merger Partnership Board are working on a transition bid for funding, which, if successful, would be supplemented by judicious use of existing reserves. What encouragement can the Cabinet Secretary offer them that the bid will be looked upon favourably?
Cabinet Secretary.
We've always recognised that merging colleges will incur exceptional and transitional costs. Colleges will need support in managing those costs, although colleges do have substantial reserves which can be applied and should be applied in these circumstances. We are providing £15 million to the College Transformation Fund, and of course I will look sympathetically and closely at any bid for resources that are required to support decisions to merge. Decisions to merge are to the benefit of the learners particularly, but they are also to the benefit of staff and the regionalisation process, which will lead to a single set of terms and conditions across the sector, which also in almost all circumstances, and I want to see in all circumstances, will mean a guarantee of no compulsory redundancy, are things of great value and worth to those very hard-working staff within colleges.
Liz Smith.
Cabinet Secretary, as a supporter of the college sector, could I ask you when it will be possible for you to announce the full costs of the college regionalisation programme?
Cabinet Secretary.
When the process is completed.
Thank you. George Adam.
Can the Cabinet Secretary provide an update on colleges that have already merged and their experience of merger?
Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, I'd be glad to do so, and there are some very good examples. The City of Glasgow College, as its principal himself has indicated, has had very considerable economies of scale and has been able to do things it would otherwise not have done. And indeed, the newly created Edinburgh College, and I've spoken to the principal comparatively recently about this, is now finding itself in a much stronger position and a much better position to deliver right across the board for students and for learning in this city. And if you go to colleges which have previously had experience of merger, such as Forth Valley College, you can see the great strengths that have emerged from that. I'm very glad that we've had the courage and determination to take forward this programme in consultation with the college sector, and it is producing and will produce very great benefits.
Question 3, Neil Findlay.
To ask the Scottish Government what action it's taking to improve the educational attainment of pupils from the poorest backgrounds.
Cabinet Secretary Mike Wilson.
Presiding Officer, this is a very important area. Raising the educational attainment of pupils from the poorest backgrounds is a key priority. Curriculum for Excellence is a major tool for such improvement. Last year, the Raising Attainment Group, comprising a number of experienced head teachers, provided me and a wider audience, in fact every teacher in Scotland, with expert advice in this area based on their successes in raising attainment in their own schools. Their evidence, coupled with the work being developed by the Association of Directors of Education and Education Scotland, identifies the key actions needed to successfully raise the attainment of all children, including the most deprived. We are delivering the conditions for raising the educational attainment for all young people, including those from the poorest backgrounds, through implementation of Curriculum for Excellence and investment in teaching and leadership is vitally important in this area, through the work of the National Partnership Group.
Neil Findlay.
Attainment results showed a stark divide between the attainment of pupils in areas of multiple deprivation and those in more affluent areas. The Cabinet Secretary has described some of the wider issues, but could he tell us what practical steps, day to day, in schools will be taken to address this widening gulf?
Cabinet Secretary.
Report of the Attainment Group. I'm happy to provide it to him if he hasn't seen it. And it is very simple. It is a series of questions about teaching practice and work within schools. And it seeks to make sure every teacher is involved in this activity. And of course, that is where the difference comes. The difference comes if schools, teachers and leaders in schools recognise this as a key issue and make sure their school is focused upon it. When you look at the work of a variety of schools in Scotland, you realise that poverty, in the words of Avis Glaze, the Ontario educator, is not destiny. There are very, very good schools servicing areas of multiple deprivation which are making enormous programme in this regard. The issue is, why are other schools which are in the same areas not doing so? And it is making sure that the best practice in one area can transfer to another area, which was the key issue for the Attainment Group, is continued with and developed. And I shall continue to do so through Curriculum for Excellence and in other ways.
Thank you. Question 4, Patrick Harvey.
Thank you. Can I ask the Scottish Government what information it has on the impact on educational attainment of exposure to lead in childhood?
Minister Alistair Allen.
While we are aware of the large body of international evidence that links lead exposure...
Microphone, Minister, please.
Okay, thank you. Apologies. While we are aware of the large body of international evidence that links lead exposure to a number of poor outcomes, including low attainment, it is not currently possible to use official data to link individual instances of lower attainment with exposure to lead earlier in childhood.
Thank you. Patrick Harvey.
Thank you. I'm grateful to the Minister for the answer. Given the growing evidence about the connection between exposure to lead in early childhood and educational attainment, as well as a host of other educational, health and behavioural issues, isn't it time that the Government agreed to conduct an assessment, particularly in relation to the primary school estate, of the level of lead contamination in land in the vicinity of primary schools?
Minister.
Well, certainly the member is right to point to a number of studies which cover such areas as criminal behaviour and effects on IQ and learning disability. There are a number of measures which have already over the years been taken to eliminate lead, not just from petrol but in the atmosphere, but also from paint and other items in schools. I am very conscious of the need to maintain purity of water in the school estate. And certainly, whenever Scottish Water has a complaint made, not just about schools, but about other buildings which have lead pipes in them or in the communication pipes to them, action is certainly taken. But if he has individual examples of schools where he is concerned that this is not happening, I'm more than happy to hear from him about that.
Thank you. Question 5, Drew Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government when the audit of waiting times for colleges will be published.
Secretary Mike Russell.
Presiding Officer, an update for MSPs on this work has been placed in Spice today. It shows that in a large number of cases, those who appear on the so-called waiting lists are not in fact waiting for a course at all, either because they have taken up another course, failed to gain the entrance qualification, moved into employment, or chosen some other option. Moreover, a significant number of people appear on more than one waiting list. We are currently verifying final figures with colleges participating in the audit, and we will publish the full report shortly thereafter.
Thank you. Drew Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm sure we look forward to the publication of those figures. There have been figures, however, reported in the media indicating that 936 potential students have been turned away at North Glasgow College. Stowe College say they have turned away more than 17,000 potential students in the last 3 years. Langside, Anniesland, City of Glasgow and John Wheatley College all say that they could not accommodate requests. And City of Glasgow College, which the Cabinet Secretary mentioned earlier, says it has 8,021 applicants on a waiting list in the last year. When will the Scottish Government be honest that slashing of college funding does result in fewer opportunities for those in my city who require a college place?
Secretary.
Well, I did try to indicate to the member that he should be very careful. I've tried this so often in this chamber. I've made it clear, for example, to Mr Findlay last October that these figures needed to be treated with great caution. I said the same thing to Liz Smith. I said the same thing to Liam MacArthur. I said the same thing to other Labour members, but they were determined not to listen for political reasons, not even with education, for political reasons. Now, if this member now turns to the audit of college waiting lists update for MSPs, now in Spice, he will learn some interesting facts. He will learn, for example, that the different processes for applications and waiting lists means, and this is the result of analysis and audit, means that waiting lists are not comparable between colleges, cannot be aggregated. There is a duplication of applicants. The majority of those on a waiting list had in fact enrolled at a college. Indeed, paragraph 8 says, and of course there's work still to be done, so I'm not being uncautious with this, the analysts also took into account a follow-up survey by one college in the sample. This college contacted every individual on the waiting list to ascertain their continued interest in the place at the college. Less than 5% of the original total indicated they remained interested. Now, the chart in this also indicates that even on an initial analysis, waiting lists were able to be reduced by 72%. Now, one of the conclusions of this, and there's further work to be required, but one of the conclusions of this says that it will be necessary to make recommendations to improve the application, waiting list process and overall data handling of colleges. So I would say to members, I know how desperate they are to weigh in on this, because they think in some sense they're going to get political advantage. Be very careful, because I have said from the very beginning that these figures were not reliable, and now we have an audit that says they are not reliable.
Neil Findlay, briefly. Mr Findlay, do you wish to ask a question?
Yeah. I wonder whether I can ask whether that new phenomenon in the IT world, the Mike Russell app, has a calculator feature so that the Cabinet Secretary can keep account of increase in college waiting lists, and also to provide better figures this year than he did last year for his boss.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, we know that Mr Finlay's Stock and Trade Presiding Officer is that sort of glib rudeness. It doesn't, however... Indeed...
Order, please.
Well,
Order.
it also fulfills the classic definition of tragedy. We've just seen something that is funny and then is no longer funny. But the reality of this, I keep trying to warn Mr Finlay, but he won't be warned. I just keep telling him he has to be very careful with these figures, because the figures he's been quoting are not true. Now, Mr Finlay prefers to shout, he prefers to bawl, he prefers to use those figures. Do you know what would be quite useful one day? If Mr Finlay learnt something about education.
Point of order, Mr Finlay.
I think the Cabinet Secretary should check the official record. In my question, I never quoted one figure, so maybe he wishes to correct himself.
I think that's a point of order, Mr Finlay, although you've made your point. Question 6, Jim Eadie.
To ask the Scottish Government what steps it will take to ensure that universities meet their obligations as proposed in the Post-16 Education Reform Bill to widen access to higher education for children from deprived backgrounds.
Secretary Mike Russell.
Presiding Officer, our universities are already making progress around widening access. However, most agree that there is scope to do more. I've been encouraged by the level of engagement shown by universities to the work led by the Scottish Funding Council on outcome agreements which include widening access objectives. On the 18th of December, we announced support for a further 1,020 articulation places that traditionally appeal to students from poorer backgrounds. With the proposals set out in the Post-16 Education Reform Bill, I am confident that our universities will continue to work with us to deliver a better deal for students from deprived backgrounds.
Jim Eadie.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer, but does he agree that the requirement for universities to widen access is absolutely vital, but it is only part of the solution? More needs to be done to encourage universities to support, advise and motivate students through guidance and outreach services and greater counselling provision, so that no young person is discouraged from accessing higher education, no matter what their background or where they come from.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I think our universities should open their doors as wide as they'll go, but young people need both the ambition and the aspiration required to walk through. They also need encouragement, and they don't need put off. And in that regard, I noted some headlines this morning provoked by Liam MacArthur, which essentially would put young people off wanting to go to university, and they were very foolish. And if that is liberal democracy, well, I'm glad that it is in its death throes. The reality is that widening access should be a job that we're all engaged in. We should all be talking very, very strongly about why it is important that young people aspire as much as they can. We should be working with the National Union of Students and others to make sure that we encourage entrance to university, and we should, of course, be providing guidance and support to students.
Thank you. Question 7, and brief questions and answers will allow us to get through more questions, please. Jamie Hepburn.
To ask the Scottish Government how it plans to ensure that student debt in Scotland remains the lowest in the UK.
Secretary Mike Russell.
It is the policy of this Scottish Government that there will be no tuition fees. It's been a major factor in ensuring that, on average, student debt in Scotland is a fraction of that accrued by students elsewhere in these islands. In 2011, the average student loan debt for a Scottish student was £6,480, compared with £17,240 in England. In addition to student loans offered with preferential terms, we also provide bursaries to those from lowest income households, more than meeting our commitment to a minimum income of £7,000. The new student support package for 2013-14 for Scottish students is generally regarded as the best on offer.
Mr Hepburn.
I thank Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Given that since tuition fees were first introduced in 1998, their maximum level has increased by 800% in England, and that 69% of those who were on the Graduate Endowment Scheme here in Scotland are still paying that back. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that those who advocate tuition fees either up front or back door, as if it wouldn't affect student debt, are quite wrong to do so?
Secretary.
Absolutely and utterly wrong, and I'm very pleased that the First Minister today, in anticipating a written constitution for Scotland, has raised the issue that the right to a free education might be seen as a basic human right and enshrined in a written constitution. I think that's a tremendous thing to do, and I can't understand why the two of the Tory members present are laughing at that. To laugh at basic human rights sounds to be a very strange thing to do.
Question 8, Ian Gray.
To ask the Scottish Government what recent advice the Cabinet Secretary for Education and Lifelong Learning has given to local authorities regarding charging for instrumental music tuition.
Mr Alistair Allen.
This Government is setting up an instrumental music group to examine issues around the provision of instrumental music tuition, and this will include charges applied by local authorities. I am happy to confirm that the group will meet for the first time this month and report its findings by the summer. The Government will continue to take this issue forward in that way.
Ian Gray.
The problem with that answer is that while the instrumental music tuition group is meeting, councils like East Ayrshire, for example, are planning to cut 50% from their budget for instrumental music tuition. In Clackmannan Council, they are considering a proposal to abolish music tuition in schools altogether. Unless ministers tell councils to sustain these services while they consider how they can be improved, surely these actions simply make a mockery of the protestations of ministers in this chamber.
Minister.
Well, the member won't be too surprised to hear that I don't agree with his assessment of that. As I've indicated already, I've come forward with a group which is trying to bring local authorities to a common position on this matter, and it will duly report on that. The position around the country is very different from local authority to local authority, but there is an expectation that this group will certainly at least address the issue of ensuring, as a basic minimum, that courses which are SQA qualifications are not subject to charging, and to trying to ensure that local authorities are brought to a position where they can agree on a common position. It's also the case that, of course, the member will be aware that £1 million has been spent by the Government on providing new instruments for music tuition around the country, and I hope that's something he would welcome.
Thank you. Patricia Ferguson, briefly.
I'm grateful to the Minister for his comments, and I note what he says about those who wish to sit an SQA or other qualification in music. But I wonder if he will make this aspect of the work of the group a priority, and whether he will at the same time look to see whether there are actually enough instructors in Scotland to ensure that our young people do have the kind of access I think we would all want to see to musical tuition.
Minister.
I'm sure that David Green, who is convening the group, will very much want to look at the issue of the availability of instructors as well as the costs, and that's certainly something I'm hopeful that he will come forward with recommendations on.
Thank you. Question 9, Kenneth Gibson.
To ask the Scottish Government what recent discussions it has had with the University of London regarding the future of the University Marine Biological Station, Millport.
Secretary Mike Russell.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government has no formal role in the decisions made by the University of London about the future of the University Marine Biological Station, Millport. However, I have spoken to the Vice-Chancellor of the University of London to emphasise our concern around the impact of the closure decision on the community of Cumbria, and I will meet with stakeholders tomorrow.
Kenneth Gibson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his reply, and I know how hard he's worked to secure the best possible future for this vital marine research facility. Can the Cabinet Secretary confirm that at tomorrow morning's stakeholders meeting and beyond, all avenues will be explored in order to retain an educational institution crucial to both marine science and the Cumbria economy?
Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, and I would pay tribute to the local member who's been working very hard on this and who has been in regular touch with me. And I don't think it's a matter for Mr Finlay or any other Labour member to cheer at. The work of the local member has been significant and continues to be so. The Scottish Government recognises the importance of the jobs and economic benefit provided by the station. I am fully aware of the fact that many academics and students in Scottish universities and schools place the marine station at Millport high in their list of priorities and have used it wisely. Indeed, I've seen the petition and the work of many people on it. But this is a decision that is being made by the University of London and the Higher Education Funding Council for England. It is an institution owned by the University of London. It is not in Scottish ownership, and the failure of the owning organisation to invest make significant investment in the infrastructure is a major feature in this. I am very keen to find a solution, both for Cumbria, for the Scottish academic community, and for those who use it. But it will not be easy to do so because of that lack of investment. But I look forward to tomorrow's meeting. I know that there will be a good discussion about what is possible and that we will move forward from there.
Margaret McDougall.
Thank you. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that the Millport Marine Station is unique in what it can offer students because it provides the diverse range of marine environments required for the study of marine ecology in a compact and ideal location. I understand that the Scottish Government has heavily invested in the marine station at the Scottish Association for Marine Science at Oban. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that the facility in Millport should also be protected due to the diverse environment it provides students?
Secretary.
Well, I don't agree it's unique, because I don't think it is unique, but I do agree it's valuable, and I don't think one should be inaccurate about this. The existence of the SAMs at Dunstafnage is important. There were discussions between the two institutions some years ago which did not result in a final outcome. I know many people regret that. The University of the Highlands Islands is one of the players within this. It is regrettable that no Scottish university has stepped forward to say that they would want to take responsibility for this, but I am keen that we have a wide-ranging discussion and that we involve the key stakeholders in this, including the University of London, and therefore I'm going to keep my thoughts and my options open on this matter, and we will see what transpires.
Thank you. Question 10, Patricia Ferguson.
To ask the Scottish Government how it encourages young people from poorer backgrounds to participate in further and higher education.
Cabinet Secretary Mike Russell.
The member knows participation is a complex issue that starts in early years, working with teachers and parents to encourage ambition. That ambition can then be realised in a system of further and higher education that's access based on the ability to learn rather than the ability to pay. The Post-16 Bill will implement our manifesto commitment to introduce statutory widening access agreements, which will deliver more opportunities for those from poorer backgrounds.
Patricia Ferguson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer, but I wonder if he could outline to the Chamber today how he plans to ensure that those young people coming from what are, at best, the worst data zones in Scotland actually benefit, and how it can be targeted towards them. And I wonder if he believes that the cut of up to £1,000 per year in student bursary will help or hinder young people in constituencies like mine who wish to go on to study at college or university.
Presiding Officer, it would be utterly perverse to represent the best funding package in these islands as a cut of any sort. I mean, only the Labour Party could do that in the present circumstances. No, maybe the Tories could do it as well. They're gifted in such misrepresentation. I have to say that this is the best funding package in the whole of these islands. It is supported without reservation by the National Union of Students. It will encourage wider participation, as will the reforms to the college sector, as will the work that we're doing in higher education. And I think that a generous member, and I'm sure that the member would want to see herself in that regard, would welcome the hard work that will be done on this and would want to back that hard work rather than cavil about it.
Thank you. Question 11, Malcolm Chisholm.
To ask the Scottish Government whether the transition between primary and secondary school can contribute to problems for S1 and S2 pupils in English and maths.
Minister Alistair Allen.
There are a wide range of factors which can cause some young people not to achieve their potential in English and maths following transition to secondary school. Under Curriculum for Excellence, reporting across schools is important to ensure well-planned and smooth transitions. There is also a strong focus on both building literacy and numeracy across the curriculum. Education Scotland supports authorities and schools with sharing best practice and transitions by a variety of approaches, including seminars and guidance.
Welcome, Chisholm.
Is the Minister concerned that while the number of secondary school teachers fell by 7.6% in the last 3 years, for which figures are available, the number of maths teachers during that period fell by 9.1% and the number of English teachers by 10.5%, with resulting larger classes, given that the general secondary population only fell by 2.3%? Does he have any regrets at all about abandoning the policy of the previous administration for classes of 20 in S1 and S2 for English and maths?
Minister.
The member will be aware that the Government does make efforts to ensure that in subjects where there are a shortage of teachers, that supply is met, and also that the Government stated its view about what it felt was the ineffectiveness of aspects of the previous Government's policy that he mentions. I think it's important to say that literacy and numeracy are embedded within the Curriculum for Excellence and given very, very high priority. The Government doesn't shy away, for instance, for example, from the fact that there is a substantial dropping off in standards in numeracy shown in the last survey on literacy and numeracy. a survey, I should say, which was conducted before the Curriculum for Excellence was fully implemented in that respect.
Thank you. Question 12, James Dornan.
To ask the Scottish Government who is involved with helping widen access to colleges for disabled people.
Cabinet Secretary Mike Russell.
The key aim of the Government, as I said in answer to the first question, has been to fund the college sector in a way that allows it to maintain student numbers. Pleased to say we are doing so to the benefit of all learners, including those who are disabled. The regional outcome agreements developed between the Scottish Funding Council and colleges will not only safeguard but will promote better educational outcomes for learners with additional needs. I believe this to be a robust approach which will ensure that the interests of this group of learners are met.
Mr Dornan.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. There have been a number of cases reported in Glasgow, including my own constituency, where departments within the local authority claim it is not their responsibility to pay for the personal assistance that are required for students with a physical disability to attend courses at college, causing huge worry and concern for those prospective students who wish to continue with their education. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that it is imperative that the local authority works to ensure that access to further education is open to all and is not limited by an unwillingness to provide the support necessary in order to attend?
Secretary.
Yes, Presiding Officer. Responsibility for a student with disability can and often is shared between health, social work and the education provider. It involves medical, living and teaching needs. It's the interest of the public purse and, vitally, of the student that there is a growing together of those statutory responsibilities and that organisations work together and cooperate in a coordinated manner to deliver the best possible service for the person that matters, that's the learner. So I'd be more than happy to consider any cases where it's felt that isn't happening and use my good offices to try and assist.
Thank you. Question 13, Claudia Beamish.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it supports young carers in balancing the demands of schoolwork and caring responsibilities.
Minister Aileen Campbell.
Recognise the dedication of young carers and the support that they need. Due to the continued priority we give to supporting young carers, there is now much more recognition of the needs of them. This is resulting in greater impetus at local level to help ensure identification and support in schools. The Additional Support for Learning Act places duties on education authorities to identify and meet the additional support needs of all their pupils, including young carers. We fund the Scottish Young Carers Services Alliance to produce the Eric and Tracy toolkit to equip primary school teachers with the necessary skills and knowledge to identify and support young carers. Work is ongoing to support and promote the continuous rollout of the toolkit. Similarly, resources for secondary schools, also funded by the Scottish Government, will be launched in the next few months.
Claudia Beamish.
I thank the Minister for that detailed answer. There are certainly, through the Young Carers Services Alliance, issues that are being taken forward in relation to support. But there are headlines in the Young Carer Strategy also which recognise the important role of school staff in identifying and supporting young carers, and therefore local authorities' carer strategies should be reflecting this. Can the Minister tell the Chamber if there are any plans to monitor these developments during 2013 and check uniformity across local authorities and individual schools, which has been raised as a concern with me?
Minister.
Thank you. I thank Claudia Beamish, because I understand that she does have a real interest in this, and I did meet with her at the Young Carers Festival in West Linton last year. Certainly, as I outlined, there is a number of areas of support that we provide to young carers, and certainly identifying who they are and where they are is important too, which is why for the first time there has been a collection of data for the first time in the census of young carers and the need that they have through the additional support for learning. We have a duty to support young carers. We also want to make sure that monitoring is in place, but that is through local authorities, through the dialogue that we have with local authorities, through the Eric and Tracy toolkit. The Scottish Young Carer Service Alliance is also collecting data through their monitoring of that, the rollout of that important toolkit. But also we do need to make sure that we do have that relevant data to ensure that we get the policies in place that are giving the support that these young carers need.
Thanks very much. Question 14, Alex Ferguson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what training is given to teachers to help pupils with additional support needs.
Minister Alistair Allen.
The teaching standards set by the General Teaching Council for Scotland require teachers to be able to identify and respond appropriately to pupils with difficulties in or barriers to learning. During initial teacher education, student teachers will gain sufficient knowledge of the most common additional support needs for them to be able to support the child in question themselves or to seek specialised information and specialised support if necessary. Teachers' career-long contractual requirements to undertake continuing professional development provides further opportunities for them to augment what they have learned during initial teacher education.
Alex Ferguson.
Well, I'm grateful for that response, and I do indeed acknowledge and recognise that there has been some progress in this area in recent times. But nonetheless, the evidence overwhelmingly points to the fact that it is the successful detection of learning difficulties in the very earliest years that makes the biggest difference to children's life chances. To that end, can the Minister tell me what additional resources might be available specifically for nursery and primary one teachers?
Minister.
Well, the member is right to point to the fact that early intervention is crucial to ensuring that we, to use our own language, get it right for every child. And I know that my colleague, Aileen Campbell, has been busy in that respect. I think there are many things that schools and local authorities do. For instance, continuing professional development for teachers through many means, including GLOW, is very much about identifying additional needs which children have. And it's important to return to the fact that the standard for full registration for a teacher at section 2.1.4 does have that as a requirement, and one which I think is increasingly understood. But to pick out one example, I think the identification of dyslexia, above perhaps many other things, not above, but alongside many other things, could make an enormous difference. And that's why we've launched our dyslexia toolkit to aid the identification of dyslexia at the earliest possible stage.
Thanks very much. Question 15, Angus MacDonald.
To ask the Scottish Government what recent progress has been made in introducing the EU 1+2 model of language teaching.
Minister Alistair Allen.
The Scottish Government published its response to the Languages Working Group report, Language Learning in Scotland, a 1+2 approach, on the 20th of November 2012. We have accepted all of the report's 35 recommendations, either in full or part. We are working with local authorities and other stakeholders to discuss and agree next steps in taking forward our commitment to a 1+2 languages policy, building on the successful conference held jointly with the Association of Directors of Education last year. We are providing funding for 10 pilot projects in primary and secondary schools across Scotland in the current school year to demonstrate how a 1+2 model might best be delivered. We have also earmarked £4 million for languages within funding for developing the Scottish schools curriculum to assist local authorities to take forward the policy in 2013-14, subject to parliamentary agreement to the budget bill.
Angus MacDonald.
The Minister for his reply. I'm sure he'll join me in welcoming the support from Falkirk Council's education services towards this new model for language acquisition in Scotland, to the extent that they embrace the proposed foreign language learning from primary one stage. Currently, foreign language learning begins in P6 in most Falkirk district schools. Can the Minister give an assurance that when the EU 1+2 system is rolled out, that Gaelic will be one of the +2 language options, if available locally?
Minister.
I certainly do welcome the support that's been shown in Falkirk and evidenced in the local press for the 1+2 model, and I can indeed, as I've done previously, confirm that Gaelic will be amongst the languages included in the project.
Thank you. Question 16 has not been lodged. An explanation has been provided, however. Question 17, Ken McIntosh.
To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to prevent reductions in the availability of college courses for students with additional needs.
The Secretary, Mike Russell.
Presiding Officer, the key aim of this Government is to fund the college sector in a way that allows it to maintain all student numbers and access. Pleased to say we're doing so to the benefit of all learners. The regional outcome agreements developed between the Scottish Funding Council and colleges will not only safeguard but promote better educational outcomes for learners with additional needs. I believe this is a robust approach to ensure the interests of this group of learners is met.
Ken McIntosh.
Can I thank the Minister for his reply, although I'm concerned that the Minister does not recognise the scale of the problem facing young students at the moment. The Scottish Consortium for Learning Disability conducted a survey in which they found that a third, more than a third in fact, of all part-time courses for students with learning disabilities were cut last year. In the face of such figures, can the Minister tell me exactly what powers he has, what is his role, what is his responsibility for addressing the needs of young students with additional needs, and why is he not intervening effectively to stop this?
Secretary Mike Russell.
Perhaps the member should have checked with the Scottish Council for Learning Disability before asking that question. I met with Lisa Curtis, the director of SCLD, on the 6th of December, along with Peter Scott, the Chief Executive of Enable Scotland. I talked with them about what we required to do, and it's not the first meeting I've had with them. Both those organisations are engaging in the outcome agreement process, as I've indicated in my answer, ensuring that students have an opportunity to influence provision. I asked both of them to bring forward new approaches, delivering opportunities for students with learning disabilities, so that this key sector was protected, and they will be coming back to me with those proposals. So let's unite in supporting those students rather than dividing in the way that Mr McIntosh invited us to.
Thank you very much. And that concludes portfolio questions for today. And we'll now move to the next item of business, which is Stage 3 proceedings on the Freedom of Information Amendment Scotland.